Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member, for holding this hearing. And I'd like to thank all the nominees for your willingness to serve the public. I am pleased that we have a native Nebraskan here today, Ken Kaposis, before the committee, and I was grateful for the opportunity to meet with you before today's hearing to discuss some of the concerns that we have in our state about water issues and to talk about the successes and the challenges EPA has had under the Clean Water Act. I appreciated your acknowledgement that for any given problem, generally EPA's first inclination to address it is with more regulation, and that is not always very productive. In Nebraska, particularly in agriculture, we've made tremendous environmental progress because of collaborative efforts. Farmers and ranchers, application of new technology and conservation practices, for instance, has resulted in incredible improvements to our land, air, water quality. These environmental gains are not the result of a permit or a mandate or a paperwork requirement from a federal bureaucracy. They are a result of cooperation between producers and local extension educators and conservation agents. These are folks who farmers trust to help them implement science-based solutions that improve our efficiency and reduce our environment impact. Nebraskans need an EPA that understands this and that will look for ways to collaborate rather than regulate whenever possible. Nebraskans also need an EPA that realizes people are the most important resource, and the goal of environmental protection should not be pursued at the expense of all others, including housing, jobs, economic development, and individual rights. When it comes to measuring our success, especially under the Clean Water Act, we need an agency that won't factor people out of the equation. I'm particularly concerned about the EPA's proposed guidance to defined waters of the United States, which would broaden the number and kinds of waters subject to regulation. Expanding the Clean Water Act scope imposes costs on states and localities as their own actions, such as transportation improvements, flood control projects, and drainage ditch maintenance become subject to these new requirements. I'm hopeful EPA will formally withdraw its proposed guidance and proceed with a formal rulemaking process that does respect the limits of law. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kaposis, I am sure that you understand the concerns that our farmers have with the guidance proposal that Senator Vitter was talking about. I'd like to ask you about a document that I found on your website that states that agricultural exemptions will remain under the proposed guidance. Are you familiar with that document? It's the agricultural exemptions remain.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly what document, but I am very familiar with the agricultural exemptions that are in the Clean Water Act. Yeah.
Okay. Madam Chair, if I could have that entered into the record, the document. Thank you so much. The document states in part, quote, "The guidance does not address the regulatory exclusions from coverage under the CWA for waste treatment systems and prior converted cropland or practices for identifying waste treatment systems and prior converted cropland." So based on that statement, I'm not clear whether the well-recognized regulatory exemption for prior converted croplands would remain in place under this proposed guidance. Can you tell me if the guidance is going to affect that in any way for the prior converted croplands exemption?
Well, I can say, of course, a final guidance document has not been issued, but there has been no attempt in either the draft guidance or in the documents that are currently under consideration to any way adversely affect the current exemptions for prior converted cropland.
So you're telling me that exemption would still remain for that prior converted cropland, in your opinion, right now?
Yes, that is the current working theory within the agency, yes.
Okay. In February, the EPA released a draft of its National Rivers and Stream Assessment, and it attempts to survey the ecological conditions of streams and rivers throughout the country. As EPA's headline in a press release announced to the American public, the agency found in the assessment that more than half of the nation's rivers and streams are in poor condition. And the EPA's Office of Water Acting Assistant Administrator Nancy Stoner stated that America's streams and rivers are under significant pressure. Although she didn't elaborate necessarily on who or what is putting pressure on these waterways, the implicit suggestion from reading that report is that agriculture and industry are the culprits. I have a problem with that assessment. I think to determine water quality conditions across the country, when we looked at that, EPA compared the sampling results with conditions at least disturbed sites around the country in different regions. And according to the EPA, this least disturbed benchmark standard is defined as those sites that are least disturbed by human activities. So it's water bodies where humans really aren't. I think that creates a problem on how the assessment is made. Do you think that that needs to be looked at on what benchmark we're using so it gives us a more realistic assessment?
Senator, thank you. I know that there have been a number of questions raised about the way EPA developed its benchmarks for conducting the water quality assessment. If confirmed, I can commit to going back, asking our people to take another look at that, and reconfirming what is the appropriate way for EPA to set benchmarks for conducting this assessment.
And then, Mr. Carbo, I do appreciate you coming to my office, and I appreciated the conversation that we were able to have there. At that time, I talked about the aerial surveillance over a number of livestock operations in the state of Nebraska, and the concern that those people felt that was a violation of their privacy. But there's also concerns because homes are near these operations. And so people have, I guess, a reasonable expectation of privacy, especially with regards to their families and their family home. How would you address those concerns, and where do you see this going in the future?
I think the key issue certainly that we in the Office of General Counsel need to focus on is what happens, if you will, to any records, pictures, et cetera, that result from those activities. I think they need to be treated with care. We need to examine upon any request whether there are any exemptions relating to privacy or otherwise that might apply to them. And I think we have to carefully apply the law.
What are you going to put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Thank you, Senator. The release that I think you're referring to, of course, didn't happen in connection with overflights. It was a separate information request. But
you also commented on the information you gained from these aerial surveillance and the privacy concerns with those as well.
That's right. I think at its core, Senator, the agency needs to carefully look at its FOIA practices.